Hi, this is Mrs. Wiederholt, and welcome to my lesson video on solving quadratic equations by factoring when a is greater than 1. And in this lesson, we're going to learn how to factor by grouping. So let's get started. There are 5 basic steps to factor by grouping, and the 6th step is to solve for x. Step number 1 is to find the factors of a times c that when added equal b. In this lesson video, we are learning how to solve quadratic equations whose a value is not equal to 1. It could be 2x squared, 3x squared, or something like that. So instead of finding the factors of the c value, we have to find the factors of the a value times the c value. Step number 2 is to replace the b times x with those factors. For example, what if 2 and 3 were your factors of a times c that when added equaled the b value? So that would mean your b value, your original b value, would have been a 5. So that means we're going to replace 5x with 2x plus 3x. Step number 3, group the first 2 terms together as a binomial and the second 2 terms together. The reason for this is that your original quadratic equation had 3 terms. It's considered a trinomial. But when you replace the original b times x with the factors of a times c, your quadratic equation now had 4 terms, or now has 4 terms. And that's why we're going to group the first 2 terms together and group the second 2 terms together. Step number 4 is to find the greatest common factor of each binomial. Step number 5, you will factor out the common binomial and rewrite in factored form. Now that your quadratic equation is in factored form, you're now ready for step 6, which is to set each binomial equal to 0 and solve for x. Now let's do an example. In this example, we have 6x squared plus 7x plus 2 equals 0. In step number 1, we need to find the factors of 12. Remember, 12 is the a value times the c value. So we have to find the factors of 12 that when added will equal 7, which is our b value. Now for 12, we know that factors are 2 times 6, but if you were to add 2 and 6, you do not get 7. We also know that factors of 12 are 3 times 4. Well, if I add 3 plus 4, I will get 7. So those are going to be the factors I use. We're going to use 3 times 4 and then 3 plus 4. For step number 2, I need to replace 7x with 3x plus 4x. So that's going to look like this. Now before you move on, you can check yourself by combining these like terms. 3x plus 4x does equal 7x. So that means you're good to move on to step number 3. Now let's look at this for just a moment. Do you see how our original quadratic equation started out as a trinomial? It has 3 terms. But after we rewrite the middle term, we now have 4 terms in our quadratic equation. And that's why step number 3 is to group the first 2 terms together as a binomial and group the second 2 terms together as a binomial. Once you've done that, you can move to step number 4, which is to find the greatest common factor of each binomial. Now let's look at the first binomial, 6x squared plus 3x. Well, I know that they both have a 3 in common, so I can factor out a 3. And if I look at x squared and x, I can also factor out an x. Now I need to divide each of these 2 terms by my common factor. And when I do that, I will have my new binomial. So 6x squared divided by 3x is 2x. And 3x divided by 3x is 1. Now let's do the same thing for the second binomial. I need to find my greatest common factor. Well, I have 4 and 2, so that tells me my greatest common factor is 2. And since both terms do not have an x, I cannot factor out an x. So now I'm ready to divide 4x by 2 and divide 2 by 2, and that will give me my new binomial here. So 4x divided by 2 is 2x, and 2 divided by 2 is 1. Now after doing step 4, your two new binomials should be the same. They should be a common binomial. So that is what is meant in step 5 when it says to factor out the common binomial and rewrite in factored form. So that's going to look like this. My common binomial is 2x plus 1. So I'm factoring that out. Now what do I have left? I have 3x plus 2. So that's going to become my second binomial. 3x plus 2. So now I'm ready to solve, and that's what step 6 is. I'm going to take each binomial and set it equal to 0. So over here we're going to have 3x plus 2 equals 0. So let's work with the first binomial. I'm going to subtract 1 from both sides, and that means I will have 2x equals negative 1. And then I will divide both sides by 2 so that x equals negative 1/2. Now let's look at the second binomial. I will subtract 2 from both sides, and that leaves me 3x equals negative 2. And then I will divide both sides by 3, and that means x equals negative 2/3. Now I want you to try one. I want you to solve 2x squared minus 5x plus 2 equals 0. Pause the video, look back at your notes, and see if you can solve this one on your own. Once you're done, press play, and I will take you step by step through it. Okay, I hope you were successful, but if not, that's okay. This is a lesson video, and we are here to learn. So let's look at step number 1. First, I found my factors, or I found out what the a value times the c value equaled. 2 times 2 equals 4. So I had to find the factors of 4 that add up to negative 5. And those factors are negative 4 and negative 1. Negative 4 times negative 1 is positive 4, and negative 4 plus negative 1 is negative 5. Now I'm ready to replace the negative 5x using my factors. So I start out with 2x squared, just like the original, but instead of minus 5x, I've replaced that with minus 4x minus 1x. And then I bring down the plus 2 equals 0. Now I'm ready to group the first two terms together into a binomial. And then I will group the second two terms together as a second binomial. Now I want you to see what I had to do here. If your third term is a negative or is minus that number, I still want you to put a plus sign in between the two binomials and treat this minus 1 as negative 1. Now you're ready to find the greatest common factor. So I look at 2x squared minus 4x, and I see that they have 2x in common. So 2x squared divided by 2x is x, and negative 4x divided by 2x is negative 2. So you have x minus 2 as your new binomial. Now for the second binomial. Now remember, you ultimately want these two binomials to be the same. And remember, we don't have to show the 1. So this binomial is really negative x plus 2. I need it to be the same as this one. So I can factor out negative 1. So I have negative 1x divided by negative 1. That equals x. I have positive 2 divided by negative 1. That equals negative 2. So as you see, I now have my common binomials. Now I'm ready to rewrite in factored form. So I factor out my common binomials and I put it first. And then with what's remaining, 2x minus 1, I create the second binomial. So now we have it in factored form, and so now we're ready to solve. Take each binomial, set it equal to 0. So x minus 2 equals 0. Add 2 to both sides, x equals 2. For 2x minus 1 equals 0, first you will add 1 to both sides, and you have 2x equals 1. Then divide each side by 2, and you get x equals 1/2. Now remember, you can always plug these numbers back in for x, and then you can see if your answers are correct. Now if you need to, go back and review the steps. Also go back and review this video if you need to. I hope this video has helped you learn how to factor quadratic equations when a is greater than 1, and I look forward to working with you again. Bye-bye.